with two and sourdough, and then two mini pies. We're going to make a apple pie and a nectarine pie, which is like the same thing as a peach pie. Just you don't have to deal with the fuzz. So let's get our sourdough into the oven to cook up. On here, I've got a loaf here that is on its last day of proofing, so it needs to be baked up. And hopefully it will come out nicely. Sometimes when it sits in the fridge a little while, it kind of will hang on here, but it will still have great flavor, even if I have to help it off. There we go. And okay. And now we're going to do a nice kind of score on the top. I'm actually going to score the pie sign if I can get it to work here. So I'm going to use my big expansion score as like the top of the pie symbol because it's pie day. And, you know, when you can, you can. And then I'll do the two little legs and we'll see if it will bake up nicely for it or if it will just look crazy because that's also a, every time I try to do something fun, it never turns out. Okay, let's get these in our Dutch oven here to kind of cook up. I had it preheating at 500 degrees here. Slide this guy right in the top of it. And this is just a traditional sourdough loaf on here. So just our classic, but it will have an extra strong sourdough flavor to it because I did a longer proofing time, both on the counter and in the fridge. So it's like at its max proofing, but will give you that really nice tart flavor to it. We're going to pop it in our oven at 500 degrees and we're going to bake for 20 minutes. Let me bring my timer here. And we'll get that going. And now we're going to peel our potatoes for our mashed potatoes part so that they can get going for the topping of our shepherd's pie. So it's kind of like we've got a fun little play on pies here, shepherd's pie, and our actual pies because it's pie day. I still remember, my algebra 2 teacher. On pie day, we played like a bunch of games and bingo and whatnot. And then all the prizes were candy bars that she had like turned into like they were paydays that she turned into like painted over it and turned the payday into a pie day. And then she did a few other ones. I can't remember exactly which kind, but I just remember that. It's funny how you remember something from like 25 years ago that is kind of silly, but sticks with you. On there, it was a really awesome day. Here we go. So I'm going to get my potatoes peeled up and then we will cube them and get them in the water to boil because we're going to have a nice mashed potato topping on for our shepherd's pie. I'm actually going to do kind of a hybrid shepherd's pie. So growing up, my mom always made shepherd's pie, but it was with like seasoned ground beef and then just a mashed potato topping on top. But then a couple years ago, I started making like a shepherd's pie, kind of cottage pie, but I did meat chunks and kind of like a meat gravy. And so today I'm actually going to do a hybrid of the two of them. So it will have both meat chunks and ground beef, and I'm going to see how it turns out. Mainly because I just had a small kind of roast to chop up, and I wanted a little bit more protein than just the small one that I have. And so I had some ground beef that was also de-thawed. So I was like, you know what? We can make it together and, see how it turns out. I think it'll turn out lovely. They're both beef. So it will just kind of give you the best of both worlds for it. But we'll do it in a nice little gravy with some carrots and mushrooms, some fresh herbs. And then we'll have that kind of cook up. We've got our sourdough bread with hopefully the pie symbol will show up. And then we're going to make our pies. I made a lovely butter crust, which is chilled now so I can roll it out. It's probably my favorite pie crust to use for both savory and sweet pies. So if I make like a chicken pot pie, I'll do that. And it's just because the butter just tastes so much better than I used to make pie crust. Like the first pie crust that I used to make was with shortening. And I don't know how, it was a long time ago, but I switched over and it is just so much better with butter. It just gives you that richer flavor for it. And so I can do mine. And it's a really simple base for our pie crust. I mean, it is just water, flour, butter, and salt. So pretty easy, but delicious. Okay, I'm gonna get a few more of these because with the mashed potatoes, you want to have enough mashed potatoes to make a good solid layer on there. Now I'm actually going to do mine. I'm going to make my base in my Dutch oven and then I'll put the mashed potatoes on top of it. But sometimes I'll do my big 9 by 13-inch pan. And if I skimp on the mashed potatoes, it's like the thinnest layer. So I like to have a good hearty, mashed potato layer because it's so good. So we're going to do a good amount of mashed potatoes here. And I'm going to do my russet potatoes because I feel like they make the fluffiest mashed potatoes. Okay, I think I'll do one more. I don't know if I need to do all of the potatoes I set out, but we'll do one more. And then we're going to try to cube them up and get them to boil for this. And then I'm going to get my base for my pies going and then rolling out my crusts for it. That way they can start to bake in the oven once we bring the temperature down to 450. Okay, I think, yeah, that should be a good amount of potatoes. And now I'm going to just kind of cube these up, try to get them roughly the same size so they'll all cook up fairly evenly. That's the only thing that you have to kind of watch out for with russet potatoes is unlike, a Yukon Gold or a new potato, they are going to disintegrate if you overboil them. So they'll just completely disappear and you'll just have starchy water instead. So make sure you kind of cut them the same size so that they'll cook up all around the same time so they don't disappear on you. Okay. We'll get these guys. That one's a big one, so I'm going to cut them up. And then I have my water going, so we'll just drop them in there. That will just help speed up the process of boiling them. And then we'll make our little pies. Now, so a lot of times I will make, like a big pie or whatnot, but I only had 5 small apples, and typically for a pie, you need like 6 to 8 good sized apples because by the time you get them peeled, they disappear they shrink around. So we're doing mini pies, and luckily I was deciding what my second pie should be. And I was, going back and forth between blueberry and like nectarine, and nectarine won out. My husband's like, "Why did you pick nectarine over blueberry?" And I was like, "Because I just made a blueberry crisp, and nectarines are like, I find that they're the nicer one of the, the stone fruit variety. The peaches, nectarines. Nectarines has all the great flavors of a peach, but no fuzz, and that's what matters." Okay, let's get these guys in here to start boiling up and cooking. I've already lost one. And then once I drop them in there, I'm going to dump off the top little starchy water on top. So it kind of gives them a little bit of a wrench, but it will make my mashed potatoes even fluffier. So you can see a little bit of that potato starch goes up to the top. And then I'm just going to dump off this top layer to get rid of that starchy water. There we go. And we'll get that boiling up there. And let's get working on our pies here. So I'm going to get my apple base. I'm going to actually cook up so that they get nice and tender. Nectarines actually will do just fine in the oven on their own without a base kind of cooking up here. So let me grab this. That way we can get the apples cooking. Because if you just try to peel your apples and then you get them in the oven and then bake them, because your pie crust doesn't need all that long to bake, What happens, I find, is that your apples don't get tender enough. So I always do a little cook on my apples just to make them a little bit more tender. And then it leaves for the perfect texture because I don't want I want my apples to be nice and tender and, juicy when you go through, not hard. And then with apples, you want to make sure you peel off that skin because the skin of the apples does not reduce down or get soft. So you'll definitely notice them. So make sure you give them a peel. With the nectarines, though, that is a much tender skin, so you can leave it on if it doesn't bother you at all. It's not as intrusive as the apple skin. So let's get these guys, and then I'll slice them up smaller for our pie. Because you gotta have pie on pie day. Which I was sitting there, I'm like, pie is one of those things where I typically make it a lot in the summer. And then in the fall, after we go to the apple orchard, I'll make a bunch of apple like pies or crisps or apple based things. But then after that, I really don't make pies all that often. Except key lime pie, because that is a pie my oldest daughter requests on, I would say, almost a daily basis. Can you make key lime pie for me? And I'm like, no, I just made it. And she's like, are you sure? I know. Maybe I should have made a key lime pie today too. To plan ahead. It wasn't until somebody mentioned, oh, pie day. And I was like, oh, you're right. It is literally coming right up. I feel like these last couple of months have gone by so fast. It's almost April and it just seems crazy on there, especially when you have, like your kids and you're just like, Teddy, he's going to go to kindergarten like next school year. And I'm just like, I'm about to get ready for like kindergarten registration. And it's just like, oh, I can't believe that he's going off to kindergarten. My sweet, sweet boy. I don't know what Jack's going to do when he's gone because they recently I feel like, they've really found like good allies in each other and their friends. Took them a while, especially because I always was like, when we had Jack, I was like, Teddy needs a sibling closer in his age and his friend. And Jack is what I like to say is kind of a jerk in the sense that he's a my way or the highway kind of guy. And his method to get his way is to either hit or scream at the top of his lungs. So it's not the most pleasant method. And Teddy is most of the time like, I don't like Jack. And they've recently been getting along and it's like been really, really cute.
Oh, what kind of apples?
So these are Pink Lady apples. So I love to get Pink Ladies because Pink Ladies are nice and tart and firm, which are great for cooking with, but they're also delicious for eating. So they're one of my kind of favorite dual apples. So for making pies and stuff like that, you want a firm apple and a tart apple. So you want to avoid like your red delicious, golden delicious. Those are going to make mushy pies on there. Granny Smith is a wonderful baking apple, but it's really tart, so I don't enjoy eating it as much. Although my kids all love Granny Smith apples, but they like really sour stuff. Me, I'm like, oh, so sour. But I do love Pink Ladies. They're probably one of my favorite apples. Although this year, when we went to the apple orchard, and the apples they had were just so good. We picked a whole bunch of them, and they were just like the best flavors. And I'm like blanking on it. I think we had like they were like Jonathan apples or something like that. They were okay. Good. I was like, that's what I'm thinking in my mind, but they were so good. It's not one that you can often get from the grocery store on there. I feel like, Pink Lady, Fuji Galas, Braeburns, those are everywhere. But not all of the more fun varieties. And these were the best apples. Okay, we're going to make them. I always like to, instead of cutting them the long way, I actually cut them on the sides. And it makes smaller chunks of apples, but I find that they're like the perfect bite size. So you're not having to like bite an apple in half when you're eating a pie. And then we'll get these stewing up and then we'll get our nectarines going and we'll roll out our pie crust. And then we're going to make some lattice tops on them. Get these. And then we'll also get our, we're going to saute up our beef for our little stew here. And we'll do the chunks first, and then I will saute up the ground beef. We'll leave the ground beef in, but I'll take the chunks out and we'll add the chunks in towards the end to keep them nice and tender. And then we'll add our veggies. So lots of good stuff tonight. Here. Okay, we've got our apples. As I always say, apple pie, it's a lot of work to get a little bit of apples. And this is only going to make a small apple pie, not even a full-size one. So we've got our apples in there. And I'm going to turn my back burner on. I'm going to add a little bit of butter to this base. And just about a tablespoon. And then we're going to add in a splash of vanilla, which kind of gives this really mellow flavor, which is really lovely. About a half a teaspoon. I'm going to turn this guy down just a little bit because he's big. We're going to add about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And we're just keeping it simple. Cinnamon, just my favorite. You know, you don't have to overcomplicate the spices. A teaspoon of cinnamon. We're going to add juice from half a lemon. And then we're going to add in some brown sugar. With Pink Ladies, and this is only a few, I'm going to add about, because I'm not doing a crisp topping on it, I'm going to add a little bit more on this because it's a double lattice pie, so it's not as sweet. I'm going to add about 2/3 a cup of sugar for this to sweeten it up, which I'm just not going to pack them down and then I have them like lightly filled. But a good amount to make them up. If you're using Granny Smith apples or an even tartar ones than Pink Ladies, you'll want to use a little bit more sugar. The tartar the apple, the more sugar you need to make it sweet.
Is that dark brown sugar?
This is actually just organic brown sugar, which does look like a dark brown sugar. It's just the Costco's on there. It has kind of a in the middle of the road flavor, but it's not as strong of a molasses flavor as a true dark brown sugar. Okay, we'll get this, guys, kind of simmering up. And once our apples have become nice and translucent, then we will know that they are ready to go into our pie base for our filling here.
Foley sent you.
Well, thank you, Foley. We appreciate that. Now for our next one, we're going to do our nectarines, which I'm not going to actually cook. I'm going to just season them up. So it's a little bit different because they're much more tender, and I don't want them to get mushy.
Will the pie recipes be in the cookbook?
Yes, they will be in the cookbook. So they are actually kind of one of those things where I'm like, oh, I should take pictures of these and make sure to update some of my pictures on there. So they will be in it. Again, with nectarines, or you can use sub out peaches instead. You do not, I will say for nectarines, you do not have to peel off the skin if you don't want to, because it's a really delicate skin. But I personally prefer to take the skin off. So I'm just going to kind of cut kind of quads off here. Makes it a little bit easier to get around that pit. Yes, I lose a little bit of the peach, but not too much. Or not the peach, the nectarine. And these are also great if you have really ripe ones or overripe ones. These work well for it. And then I will always, I keep those things because my little ones love to just like gnaw on the core part around it. So we've got these. Get around that stone in there, that pit. So we've got our kind of base for this. Makes it a little bit easier. Again, I do not love the skin, so I typically take most of it off, but if I leave a little bit on there, that's fine for it. Don't worry if these were in the fridge. So sometimes when you put your nectarines in the fridge after they get ripe, they'll turn, instead of being like really things, they'll turn a little bit brown, but they're still going to be sweet and taste delicious. It's just I didn't have time to cook them up earlier in the week, and I didn't want them to go completely bad for it. And these are white nectarines versus the nice kind of peachy ones. But we'll have nice, great sweet flavor to them. And again, I'm taking off most of the skin, but it's fine if there's a little bit for it. It means I just don't have to do as much work. It's not like an apple. I got these like the other day, they were having a big sale at Costco. And I was like, I haven't gotten nectarines in a long time. Torrin loves nectarines. He used to put one in his lunch every single day. Isn't it good? You know me, I don't like peaches. I love the flavor of peaches, but I can't get past that fuzzy skin. I really don't like that fuzzy skin. I don't like touching it either. It's just one of those weird sensory things I have, but I do love the flavor of them. With the peaches or the nectarines, I'm going to leave them a little bit bigger than I do with my apples, simply because these are more tender. And if you cut them too small, you are going to get more of a mushy base then. Okay. And then we're going to season these fairly similar. Now, sometimes when I'm making things with peaches or nectarines, I'll add in a little bit of nutmeg. But today I'm just going to keep everything with just the cinnamon and the brown sugar. But I'll do a nice squeeze of fresh lemon juice in there, which will pick up a little bit. I feel like peaches are a little bit more brighter in flavor than with a basic apple. And then we'll toss these, and I'm going to toss them with brown sugar, some butter, flour, which will help kind of soak up the liquid and make almost kind of like a nice fruit gel in there. You could also use cornstarch too. And then we'll get working. Once we've got this, we'll get working on our base of everything so they can start to saute off as well. I always say this is always the most fun part about cooking is the peeling of it. I'm going to get these last ones off, and then we'll go take the lid off of our sourdough so that we can do the kind of second baking at 450, which will be perfect because then our pies can go in at that lower temperature. Here we go. A few more pieces to slide them off. And this is like, I used about 5 for each one, and these 5 will make a small one. I'm going to tell you, they're not going to make a very big pie. They're going to make a nice small pie. You don't underestimate how much fruit you need in a pie to get there. Okay, got one more piece left, and then we will get our sourdough out. Okay. Now let me slide this guy over here because I'm going to need something to take this off. So we've got our sourdough baking in here at 500 for 20 minutes. We're going to take the lid off of our Dutch oven, and then we'll pop it in there to bake for another 20 minutes at 450. So we'll see if my pie sign, it really didn't pop at all for it. But let me see if I can add a second little expansion score in there to see if it will pop a little bit more. Yeah, I always say anytime I try to do a nice fancy one, it never pops up as well. There we go. We're going to get this guy in. Still tastes delicious. It actually kind of looks more like a rudimentary bear cave calling than it does like a true pie symbol. Okay, we're going to bring this temperature down to 450, not air fry. Oven mode bake, 450, and then we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes on here. Okay. Let's get, since those are cooking up there, let's get our base of our stuff starting to go. That way it can start cooking off for that, and then we can finish up our pies over here.
You have a question. What's with the apples in the pot?
So in the pot, I have brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, vanilla, and juice from half a lemon in there. And it's just going to add this just great flavor to it for it. So here we've got, this is a tri-tip roast that we're going to chop up for the kind of the chunky meat base in our shepherd's pie. And then I also have some ground beef. So I'm going to just kind of cut it up into some smaller cubes. That way we can kind of stew it for a little bit or sear it off. I'll remove the big chunks out so they will stay nice and tender for it. And then we will just going to cut off some of this fat. And then we'll cook up our ground beef. And then we'll add in our onions and carrots and mushrooms and whatnot for this.
Foley sent you a little crown.
Well, thank you. I'm queen for the day.
You have a question. What's a tri-tip?
A tri-tip is just like a nice cut of beef roast on there. I'm kind of like mixed. I'm like terrible of actually being able to tell you the exact part of the animal on there. You know, I always used to look at and be like, oh, this is this. And then I would confuse it all. So I could tell you something, but I could be also confusing it with another tip because it's not something I just buy and I know it tastes good. That's the best knowledge I can give you on there. Except I do know that the filet mignon, that's the best one. That's the one my daughter tells me that I should buy. And I'm like, girl, you are too bougie to, if you want filet mignon. And every time she sees it, she's like, can I get it? Can I get it? And I'm just like, spoiled. Here. And then we're going to kind of cut through here. And I'm going to just make simple kind of smaller chunks. We're going to do a quick season up on this, and then we'll saute it off. And just get a nice kind of medium rare saute off on this. We'll move it out so that we can pop it back at the end, and it'll keep it nice and tender because we're not going to do a full on like stewing of it. Okay. Let me check my apples out here. Beautiful. I'm going to turn that down nice and low, and we're just going to let it simmer on low over there. Okay, for our meat seasoning, I am just going to keep this really simple. Garlic, salt, and a little bit of black pepper is really all that we're going to do for it. I'm going to use some fresh herbs later in the base of it, but for just kind of cooking up the meat, we're going to do this. A good shake over it. I'm at the very beginning of this new container and it doesn't come out as quickly. And then some black pepper. Here we go. And then I'm going to heat up in our pan. And I'm actually going to saute this off in, where's my butter? Well, we'll just grab olive oil. We'll do a little bit of olive oil and we'll cook this off. And again, I'm just going to do a nice kind of quick sear on it. Bring those to a nice kind of medium rare, crisp, outside, but nice pink in the middle, which is the way we love it. And then I'll remove them out. And then we'll cook up our ground beef and then our veggies. But since I'm not going to, with a roast or something like that, if you cook it for too long, you can make it tough, but then the longer you cook it, you can make it tender again. But this is kind of like a quick shepherd's pie. We're not going to stew this base all day. So I want to do that kind of nice sear on the outside to keep the meat nice and tender for it. Okay, we've got that right there. Once this is hot, we'll pop those in. But let's get our nectarines here seasoned up in there. We're going to season them with a little bit of, let me grab my sugar first. Our sugar. Now, nectarines are sweeter than apples, so you don't need quite as much sugar for this. So I'm only going to use a half a cup versus the 3/4 that I use with my apples. Just because they aren't nearly as, they're very sweet. And if you do too much, then they get a little over the top sweetness with them. So I got a half a cup of my brown sugar. We're going to squeeze a half a juice from a lemon on here. And then I'm doing just kind of similar flavors. We're going to do about a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract because, again, this is a small batch of pie, not a big one. And then we're going to do about a teaspoon of cinnamon. We're going to coat that up, and then we'll add in some butter and some flour to kind of make a thicker base for it. You could also use some brown or some cornstarch if you wanted. So we're going to just coat these until they're completely coated with our sugar base. We'll let them sit for a second before we toss any flour in. But you're essentially coating up all of those little nectarines with like sugar and whatnot. And again, I do this with the nectarines because they will cook up fast in the oven. But apples, you need to make them a bit more tender. Otherwise, they'll be too firm. Okay, let's get these guys. I'm going to clear up this so I have a space to roll out. And then my oil should be just about hot enough to drop off our first round of meat. And then we'll roll out our pie crusts. And we'll get those going here. And then we'll cook up our insides for our shepherd's pie. My mashed potatoes should be getting tender soon so we can whip those up into a nice creamy mashed potato. Okay, got this on here. I'm going to take these scraps over. Perfect. Let's see. Almost there. I don't want to put it in. I want to make sure I have a nice hot oil so that I can sear it off. I'm going to give it, I feel the residual heat, so we should be good. We're going to drop in our meat. There, I'm getting a nice saute. And again, we're going to cook off I'm probably going to have to do this in 2 batches because I do want them both to have a nice little spot on the bottom of my pan here. Add in one more piece. Beautiful. And we'll let those saute. It'll take about a minute or so on this side, and then we'll flip them over. My swig. Okay, let's get our pie crust rolled out while we're working here. My trick for pie crust, I roll them out between 2 sheets of parchment paper, which just makes it easier for me to transfer them without like tearing the pie crust. Just works a little bit easier that way. This is my butter crust. I made it. I had it chilling in the fridge. This is a double batch of it, but because we're making 2 and I wanted to make sure I have enough. But I used a whole pound of butter in these 2 crusts here. Whole pound of butter, 4.5 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 20 tablespoons or 300 milliliters of water, ice cold water. You essentially, just like you're making a like scones or biscuits, you're going to cut your butter into your flour and salt mixture until you have no chunks of butter bigger than like a pea. And you want to use cold butter because cold butter is going to give you that nice flaky texture on your pie or crust.
You have a question. Did you go to culinary school?
I did not go to culinary school, but I started cooking when I was 13 years old and started taking over the family meals for our family. And I pretty much never stopped. I love cooking. When I went off to college, I went to the same college as my brother who went to Iowa State. And I used to go to his apartment every Sunday and I would cook for him and his roommates. My mom would like send money and she'd be like, oh, it's the way to like keep you guys all together. And so she would send money for the family dinner and I would always cook a big meal so they would have lots of leftovers, and then I'd make a dessert. And you know, it's funny, I was thinking about it because my aunt sent me a picture from back in college today, and I was like, oh, that was so long ago. And my brother used to love it. My oatmeal cinnamon chip cookies. That was his most requested dessert that I would make back then. And then they loved my chili, my famous chili that I've been making, I feel like, for 20 years now. That was also a big hit. Okay, we've got this guy. pretty much rolled out, but let's get our meat over here flipped over. You know when they're ready to flip is when you start to get sign of the brown edges coming up on the side. So we're going to flip these over.
Are these recipes posted anyway?
So we do post all of our lives to the link on our page, so you can always rewatch and cook along with me again. I do send out recipe cards a few times a month for our members. And right now, I'm in the process of making a cookbook that will have several recipes. Our pie recipes will be in there. And that will be hopefully ready by at least the digital copy by the end of the month. We're did a lot of work on it today while I was at my daughter's soccer practice, her little ODP. So it's really, really great work, and I'm excited for it because we're doing little QR codes as well. So every recipe has a video of me making it, like connected to one of our streams. So it gives you not only like the recipe written down, but you can always cook along with me that way. So I'm pretty excited for it on there. There we go. These two are just about ready. And then we'll get these off. Let me give my apples a nice stir. Beautiful. Look at that. It's going to be so delicious. Okay, we're going to take these chunks of meat out. Again, I'm cooking them to nice medium rare. I don't want to overcook them. I want them to be nice and pink in the middle. I also know that they will continue to cook. The cameraman is ushering where the meat chunk should be placed because he likes to take his cameraman dues. They're very hot, so don't eat them yet. Let them cool. I'm warning you. He popped a very hot meatball the other day and regretted his choice. There we go. We'll get these last little chunks in here, and then we'll cook up our ground beef. So we're going to have nice chunks of meat, and then you also have the ground beef. I always feel like the ground beef was like the poor man's version of the shepherd's pie, which is what we ate a lot of because we were a big family, and it was my mom. She would make it a big thing like that, and it was ground beef seasoned with like rosemary, black pepper, garlic. It was delicious. And then the mashed potatoes on top. I've kind of elevated it a little bit. Okay, we've got our first round base right here of our pie. This, when I go to press the dough together, I do like a press and fold technique, which allows to have such flaky layers. We're going to use, these are little like deep dish pizza pans, but they work perfectly for mini pies. So I'm just going to spray it down with some oil. That way that crust will lift up nicely when we go. And then I'm going to put this guy over the top. And then I always say you do your double layer like this between the two parchment papers so that you can easily peel it off. And then because this is a deep dish, I'm going to tuck it down in here. I'm going to leave my edges on until we do the lattice work on there. But stuff it down and then fold it over, and then we'll cut the sides off and everything. Beautiful. So we've got one pie right here. And then we can I'm going to turn off my apples because they're just about done. You can see our nectarines here have started to sweat and kind of make a nice little sauce with the brown sugar. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of flour in here so that it will absorb that sugar. It will absorb some of that extra moisture and won't give you too much of a soupy mess for it. You can also use cornstarch. So if you want to go gluten-free, cornstarch is great. They're both great ones. I'm out of cornstarch, so I'm going to use flour today, but they work kind of honestly back and forth. You're going to want to add a little bit of butter into your base here so that it will melt with the flour and give it kind of takes away the powderiness flavor of it. I'm going to use about a tablespoon here of our soft butter, and then we're going to do about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of flour, just enough to kind of coat it on there. And this will allow it to soak up some of that liquid, and then as it heats up in the oven, it will thicken up almost into like a fruit gravy, a slurry. Okay. I'm going to put this base in here. And then we'll get our top on there. And this again is this is 5 nectarines. And I tell you, it feels like you've made like the tiniest pie ever, but it will be delicious. Make sure I get all of that nice sugary base in here. Beautiful. Let's get our meat flipped over, and then we're going to make our lattice top for this. There we go. And got them all kind of flipped over. It's just a quick cooking on the other side to be done for this, and then we'll be ready. I'll say, today has been such a busy, busy day. I think I spent, I left this morning at 7 a.m. to drive out to the soccer fields, which were about an hour away they had ODP, which is Olympic Development Training. Both my girls made the team.
A quick question. So you pre-cook the apples, but not the nectarines, right?
Yes. So the nectarines are very tender, and pre-cooking them can lead to a more mushy fruit in there because they can overcook easily. Apples are firm, and so they need a little bit of that cooking to get to the base of it and to take out just a little bit of that moisture here for it. I'm going to get our top here. I'm going to roll this out, and then I'll cut it into strips, and we'll do the lattice work on there. So let's I have to steal this away from the cameraman. Greedy, greedy, greedy. He's going to eat all of our delicious meat chunks.
You can use the ground beef.
He's like, he'll take his serving. I don't think the girls and the boys would appreciate that. There we go. I will say he does not enjoy shepherd's pie as much as my kids and I do. We all love it. I think he's not one to have his potatoes touch his food. He likes them separate. I think he must have grown up on, those kids' plates where there are the meal dividers where nothing touched. That's what I said. I grew up on the plate where everything touched, and I like everything touching. And we're going to get our ground beef in here, and we'll cook it up, and then we'll add in our onions and our other base for it. Let's get a little bit of seasoning in here. Again, we're going to keep it nice and simple. Garlic salt. We'll do about a teaspoon or so. And then we're going to do some black pepper. And then let me grab, I can grab these tongs. I'm going to turn this down just a smidge. And we're going to let this kind of cook up. There we go. We'll let that cook. Let's get this lattice done so we can at least get one in the oven right away. Okay. Just make sure it's big enough to go over the top, but you don't have to make it crazy big. I'll slide this off. And then for our lattice work here, it's actually fairly simple. You're just going to cut strips down like this, and then you just do kind of a weave on your pie.
Instead of garlic salt, could you use sea salt and garlic powder?
Yeah, you could always use sea salt and garlic powder. The only thing I find is that garlic salt has a smoother texture. It's more like garlic juice and salt versus powderized garlic. So for this meal, it wouldn't make a difference, but some of the other things, like if you're making guacamole or dip where you don't want a grit texture to it, it does make a difference. Okay, let's get this lattice work done. I always start by just kind of laying them out, and then I will kind of work on the movement of them. Let's go grab our sourdough out of the oven, and then we're going to turn our oven down to around 400, 425 is kind of the best way to cook it off here. So I'm going to bring this down to 425. But you can do 400 too, but 425 works a little bit better. Let's get this guy. Got my alligator upside down. Oh, he kind of popped out a little bit more. Doesn't look like a pie sound. I tried to be all pie-rific. Okay. So we've got our sourdough loaf here with my attempt of a pie symbol. Yeah, not really that much of a pie symbol, but we tried. I'm taking it out of my Dutch oven so that it will be, it won't continue cooking on the bottom, but almost, not quite. I think a regular expansion score would have done better, but you know, teach its own. Okay, let's get these guys on here so that we can weave our, I like to always lay them down and then I do the weave because it's easier that way. And then we'll kind of cut and go around it. So just simple like this, and then you alternate. So this one goes up and
is that homemade pie crust?
it is. This is a butter crust, which is my favorite. So this I use for both sets of these, a whole pound of butter in them. And then 2 or 4.5 cups of flour with 2 teaspoons of salt and 300 milliliters of water, also 20 tablespoons. But that was to make a lot of pie crust here. Now we're going to go around. We're going to press all the way around the edge and then we'll cut it off. I always do my fork crimping first and then I will cut it off with a scissor because that way you'll get the pretty edges and you'll make sure you don't cut off too much. So you just do your little press around and then we'll cut our edge off. And it's just our beautiful nectarine pie, which has all the same flavors as a peach pie, just no peach fuzz. There we go. And now, this is always the fun kitchen shears. And this is how you make that pretty edge. This is your, what is it? Your Leave It to Beaver, Dennis the Menace pie that's going to sit out in front of your windowsill and will be all pretty. Okay. So we've got pie number 1. If you want a shiny pie topping, brush it with egg wash. If you like just plain matte, I keep it matte. You just put it in here like this. We're going to pop this one in the oven to bake. That way we'll have at least one come out. Will be perfect. Again, this cute little tiny itty bitty pie and all that work. We'll get the rest of our shepherd's pie going on here for this. This takes about 20 or so minutes to bake up for this 25 minutes on there. So I'm going to just set it for 20 and we'll look at it. You'll know it's ready when that pie crust is golden brown on there. It goes a little, peaches go faster. I pre-cook my apples, so my apples go faster. Versus if you want to do it the long one where you don't cook your apples, then you've got to bake your pie for like an hour. But the problem with that is you risk overcooking your pie crust. Okay, we were going to have this cook up. Let me check my potatoes to see if they're ready to strain and get ready to mash those up for it. What I like to do is when I check them, I'm going to grab a spoon and a fork.
Yeah, but did the pie go on a cookie sheet in there?
I did not put it on a cookie sheet, although I probably should slide a cookie sheet underneath because it may boil over, which when I go back over there, I'll do that. These are perfect. That is you can definitely do it moving it in and out. I highly recommend it. Otherwise, you're going to have cleaning duty. And I tend to forget to do that a lot. Let me grab this out. I'm going to reserve some of this starchy water for our mashed potatoes to make our like kind of gravy base for our shepherd's pie. So you don't have, you could use regular one, but this will give us a nice thickener. It's going to be hot. So when I add some beef bouillon to it, I can flavor it up, season it up on there.
Do you have a specific date for the cookbook yet?
I'm hoping at the end of this month that the digital copy will be ready for available. And then a couple weeks after that, like a hard copy. So our plan is end of March.
So
no specific date. It's gonna, how much I grind to get there. We're making really great progress on there. And I've been going through and making sure everything is, updated and perfect on there. I'm gonna take this off the heat. I'm gonna tuck my stick of butter in here to melt, and we'll whip this in just a second for that. And then I'm gonna go slide a baking sheet right under that pie, just so we don't have a mess to clean up later.
Do you cold proof your sourdough?
I do cold proof my sourdough. I think that gives you the best pop and the rise of it for it. Now, there are lots of ways that you can do it where you just have a one, like where you sit and leave it on the counter all day, but I really like that spring that cold proofing gives you for it. Okay. Our ground beef is just about ready here. And then we'll get our next things, but let's roll out our next crust for it for our apples while we wait for that to cook up. And I actually think I'm going to pull out some of this ground beef so I have a little bit more base on the bottom for our onions and everything to cook up here. Okay. I think I can actually get, well, I'll use this one. It's a bit more cold. I keep, your pie crust, I made these homemade. I put them in the fridge to chill for about 2 hours. And then I always set them out a little bit beforehand so that they're not rock hard cold. So when you roll them out, just because it makes it a little bit easier to roll out, but that cold crust is going to give you nice flaky layers.
Do you have any tips for the best mashed potatoes?
Yes. The best mashed potatoes are, my tip is to use russets because they are a very light potato, which will give you a really fluffy one. And then I don't whip them until my butter is completely melted in there. And I use room temperature butter because cold butter will make your potatoes more sticky. And then I'll pour cream in there and wait for that to warm up. And again, butter, cream, and russet potatoes is where it's at. Don't use milk. You're eating mashed potatoes. You're not on a diet because they're delicious. So do them right. And that's what I always say. Use the cream. It makes them so much better. Okay, let's get this guy rolled out for our next one. And then we can get our onions and whatnot cooking in there. Here we go. And beautiful. So I've got it nice and big. We've got a deep dish, so you want to make sure you have a good amount on every side so that you don't have any like small parts of it. And then just make sure it's about as evenly rolled out, which is why I like to do it between 2 pieces of parchment paper. Gonna just oil up the bottom of my pan here. We are using deep dish baking pans for this because they work perfect for like mini pies. And then I just kind of hold it over the top. I peel this off, and then we'll tuck it in there for it. And then we'll get our lattice work going here. And we'll get this one in the oven. So just make sure you put it down there and give it enough room. You don't want to like tear or try to stretch it. You just want it to rest on there so that it will come out nicely. For our apples here, we're not going to pour all of this liquid in there because we don't want that liquid in the base of our apple thing or make it too liquidy.
Yeah, question. Could you warm up the cream and the butter for the mashed potatoes before adding it?
Yes, you can definitely do it. I actually need to add my cream in here. I just put it in here so it can melt, and that way it will just take the time, but you can definitely warm it up if you want to speed up that process. And add about a fourth of a cup to a third of a cup. And I'll add a little bit more later. I typically do 2 whipping processes so that it goes by pretty quickly. Like they settle and then they can kind of go through again. Let's get this turned. I'm going to use a slotted spatula to get the rest of my apples out because I don't want to take too much of this liquid with me because it will make my pie too soupy. But you see how they're nice and translucent. Most of them are. That means they'll be very tender in our pie. But like I said, 5 apples does not go very, very far in a pie. So you're typically use, and these are smaller ones, but I typically use 6 to 8 bigger sized apples in it, which is why we have a mini pie today. There we go. So we'll get all of these guys out here, spread it around. Oh, one more. And then I will just take like a couple spoonfuls of this liquid and I'll pour it over. I try not to add too much because I don't want it to be too liquidy. You can also mix in, if you want to add more liquid, you can mix in some cornstarch to thicken it up and it will give you more of a gel type base inside your pie. Just enough. And then we can roll out our lattice topping here. Where did I put my second one? But before we do this lattice topping on here, let's get I'm going to take some of this ground beef out and we can get our onions cooking so that we can get our shepherd's pie going here. I'm just going to take a little bit of this out just so I have a bit more space on there. But ground beef, you take your big chunks of meat out so they don't overcook, but ground beef is already tender and kind of in there, so you don't need to worry about that getting overcooked. But I want some nice space on the bottom of my pan for my onions and carrots to cook and my mushrooms. So I'll leave a little bit of those drippings in there, but I'm going to take most of that out. I'm going to get my onion in there to saute up real quick, and then we'll finish up our lattice pie on our apple. Now, sometimes with an apple pie, I either do like they're the double pie crust or the lattice, but I also will make a crumb topping, like a streusel topping, which is really delicious. It gives you a mix of an apple crisp and a pie for it, but it's a lot of extra work in the sense that you've got to make crumb topping and pie crust. Now, when I make a strawberry rhubarb pie, I always do the crumb topping on it because strawberry rhubarb is a more tart type of pie and it works really well for that. Okay, we'll get these onions kind of diced up for the base of ours. Get our first round in here. Cooking up. I'm going to add in a little splash of olive oil just because we have some meat drippings, but not a whole lot in there. Give them a quick stir. We'll let those saute for a second. Okay, let me wash my hands.
What brand knives do you use?
I use Wusthof Classic. I've had my knives for going on 17 years. I got them as a wedding present, and I love them, and they've lasted 17 years. So they've done really well. They've got a good heft to them, and they're sharp, and I love them. Will say they're worth the price. They are a bit more pricey on there, but out of all the knives I've had or gotten, they're my favorite. And I got a big knife set from my siblings, gave me that as a wedding present. And as you can see, I like to cook back then. For my wedding, I didn't want the traditional like China settings. I was like, oh, I don't want the China settings. I said, I want the good cookware. So I got like all clad pots and pans and the Wusthof knives, and everything was on her wedding list. Was practically, it was cookware. But I loved it, and I still use it. Okay, I got this is going to be our top. Again, just a little bit bigger for this. I'm going to have enough pie dough that I'll have to make something else with this pie dough. And then I'm just going to cut my strips, and then once we've got them layered on, we do it. I like to make my lattice pie strips a little bit thicker. I don't do them super thin, as in thick this way, because they pop up, and I think they're really delicious when they're thick. But you can roll them out thinner if you like them thinner on there. See, those little apples there, they didn't cover very much. So we'll get 4 across. And then you just kind of, weaving is not as difficult as you might think. It's just you reverse it. So this first one was on top, so then the second one goes underneath. And I always lay all 4 strips in one direction, and then I come back through with the next one. But it gives you, it's really simple, but it gives you a really pretty pie that makes it look like you spent a lot of time making it, but it's not that difficult on there. So we've got our pie base around here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use our fork here, and then you're just going to press all the way around, and then we'll use our kitchen shears to cut off. So just wherever your pie crust meets your tin, that's where you're going to press. And then we'll cut off. But don't cut off until you do the press. Otherwise, you'll either cut too far or too close, and it doesn't look as nice. So do your pressing first. And then just take your scissors and right along the edge of your pie tin is where you cut. Now, if you are using like disposable pie tins, aluminum foil, just don't cut through the aluminum foil. I've done that before where I didn't realize that I was like cutting the edge of it. There we go. And then you can always use this extra pie crust. You want to press and fold it back together, but it's still good to use it. Just don't knead it, press it and firm it. Let's pop this in the oven real quick so that it can start baking up as well. And we can take a peek at our other one on there. Beautiful. And then I'm going to actually give this pie a rotation because your back of your oven loves to cook a little bit higher than your front. But look how gorgeous that is already looking. So beautiful. That one will be ready in a few minutes. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Let's get this kind of cooked up here. And we've got our onions in there. We're going to add in some garlic. We're going to peel up our carrots. We'll get those cooking up. We're going to add in some spices, get our mushrooms in there, make our gravy, pop our meat in there, put our mashed potatoes on top, and then our shepherd pie will be pretty much done on here for it. So we're going to get this ready and popped up on there. Get this minced up. I'll say it's a good thing. You know, it's just we've got a small crew tonight. It's just our older kids and I, and luckily, so the little ones are at their grandparents' house. So it's been kind of nice, but it was a crazy day for it. Luckily, we're all night owls here. Let's get these garlic in here, and we're going to let our garlic toast up and get a little bit of that nice flavor in for our base of it. And it kind of works out well. I told you my daughters, they had ODP today, which is their Olympic Development Program. And we went out to eat. We had kind of a late lunch today. And And I had this inspiration. So I got this sandwich and it was so good. It was called the morning porker. And it was sourdough bread with bacon, ham, fried eggs, and then like lots of cheese. And I was like, oh, this is like the best breakfast sandwich. And I was like, I'm going to recreate this sandwich because I think it will be delicious. And then it was served with kind of like potato wedges, like breakfast fries on there. But it was so good. And I took a picture of it. That's how much I was like, good inspiration. That's one of those things. A lot of times when I'll we do sports, so we're always going out and eating there. I always like to use that as little inspirations of what food I should make next on there. Okay, we've got our carrots going here. We're gonna dice these up, throw them in there, toss them in there, and then we're gonna do our first whip up on our mashed potatoes, so that we can put that on top of this. And then we'll get our mushrooms in here and we will get those kind of sauteed up nicely. I'm going to do kind of a nice smaller dice on these. Here. And let's get these guys in. Going. Beautiful. So we'll slice these through. You want them to be nice, kind of smaller chunks because I don't like to have really big chunks in there. It will get tender a little bit faster and you'll be able to have nice carrot chunks throughout. So it's not just like a big, huge piece of carrot, but you'll get like a meat chunk and a carrot chunk. Now I'm keeping the base filling of this pretty simple, but if you love peas, I highly recommend putting peas in there. I feel like I'm the only one in my family that likes peas, so they're not going in today, but it would be lovely with some peas in there. There. That garlic smells wonderful. And there we go. So we're going to add our carrots in. We'll let those saute up here for just a second. Give it a good stir around. Kind of coat them up. And they've got those nice garlic, onions, some meat drippings in there. While those are working, let's get our mashed potatoes here whipped up. We've got our cream in there and our butter, and it looks like it's all melted. So that will help give you a nice fluffy mashed potato. I'm going to add in a sprinkle of salt. And I'm going to just use regular salt. I like my mashed potatoes just with regular salt versus like a garlic salt for them because they're more simple in their flavor. I'm going to whip these up and then we'll see if we need to add any more cream or whatnot. But as long as you've cooked all of your potatoes all the way through, you should have a nice fluffy mashed potatoes. If you ever wonder why you get lumpy mashed potatoes, it's because your potatoes didn't get cooked all the way through.
How much cream did you add?
I added about a third cup of cream in here for it. There we go. And they look pretty darn good. Do a really quick whip. And then I might add a splash more cream, but I'm going to give a quick taste and see. I'm going to do a little bit more cream. I'm going to let it warm up. And then a little bit more salt. And then I'm going to let it warm up and whip up together. Let's get our mushrooms in here. And then we're going to go grab our pie out of the oven, our first set of pies out. But I want to get these sauteing there so that we can get kind of a go on them. And this is going to be, we're going to mix this is going to be the lovely base to our shepherd's pie here. a little bit more. I always said my mom's growing up was really just ground beef with mashed potatoes on it. I have added a little bit more vegetables in here to make it a little bit more hearty, and then we'll make a lovely kind of gravy. But let's get our mushrooms in here. We can let those start to saute up with those carrots. And then we'll go check on our first pie, see how that is going in there. Beautiful. Okay. Let's get this guy on the road. Beautiful. So we've got that. I'm going to set the timer on here for our second one for 15 minutes. But look at this beautiful nectarine pie, which gives you all the flavors and tastes of a peach pie, but so good. Look at that. You can see the flaky layers on our pie crust. That is from the press and fold method of just pressing and folding in the crust instead of, you don't need it, but you press and fold, press and fold. So going to be absolutely delicious. We're going to add in some spices to our base here. I've got some rosemary. I'm actually going to chop this up. Some fresh rosemary. It's a little bit more, got more texture in it, so I'm going to mince it up just a little bit more. You could use dried rosemary as well. I would use about a half a teaspoon of dried. Fresh, you can go a little bit more because it's not as strong. And I do love fresh because it's also not as firm. So we've got about a teaspoon of fresh rosemary. We're going to add in some fresh thyme. For the thyme, I'm just going to take the little leaves off like this. And we're going to add in about a teaspoon of fresh thyme leaves. Good, right on that. I'll do maybe one more. There we go. Give this a nice little, I'll add these in here while we're at it. Give this a nice little stir. Gorgeous. Our carrots are just about tender. Beautiful. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little spot in the middle right here, and we're going to add in our tomato paste for the base of this. And then we'll mix that around. This tomato paste is going to give you a really kind of a nice acidity to the broth base of it. You're not using a whole lot, just around a tablespoon of tomato paste, but a little goes a long way in adding flavor and a nice bit of acidity. We're going to mix it up here. Let it get a chance to heat up on the bottom. There we go. And then I'm going to add in a splash of red wine for this, around, I want to say, a tablespoon or two. Adds a nice little bit of acidity as well. Kind of brings those flavors in there. We're going to let that cook off just a little bit. Adds almost kind of like a beef bourguignon base flavor to it. Smells so good. And then before we add in our starchy potato water and our beef, we're going to sprinkle a little flour over the top of this.
So you have how much red wine did you add?
I added in about 2 tablespoons of red wine. You don't need a whole lot, but just enough to give you that little note of acidity that is lovely. We're going to sprinkle the top of this with flour. We're going to use about a tablespoon or 2. I'm going to first, and then we'll mix it and kind of coat it up and add in more. This is going to give you a thicker base to our kind of our meat base on there. And I just like to make sure, you know, you mix in half and then you add a little bit more. But it should kind of coat everything with a nice little paste on it. Don't just like dollop it in. Try to sprinkle it around so that it coats evenly. And you could always sub in some cornstarch too if you need to go gluten-free for it. Okay. We're gonna let that sit and heat for a second. I'm gonna whip these mashed potatoes real quick. Get that final whip on them. There we go. Well, beautiful. So we should have a nice, lovely mashed potatoes put on top. Okay, I've got our potato starchy water here. I'm going to mix in a spoonful of beef bouillon with this so that it has a nice rich beef flavor towards it on there. And then
what meat did you use for this?
We are going to be using, I have some beef chunks and some ground beef that we sauteed off in the beginning, and we'll throw those in at the very end to add there. So a mixture of it, but you could use one or the other. I just happened to have a little of both, which was perfect. Okay. We're going to add this in a little at a time. Kind of deglaze that whole bottom of it. This is going to make more of a thick gravy. We don't want it to be a soup, but more like a thick broth based on there. Beautiful. There we go. And then we can throw our meat in here. We can put our mashed potatoes on. And our shepherd's pie will be just about done. Beautiful. So you can see we've got this nice kind of thick gravy base for it. Now what I'm going to do, add a little bit of freshness to this on there, is I've got some green onion. We're going to toss in our green onion. We're going to toss in our meat and turn this down nice and low. And then we'll coat it with our mashed potatoes on there. And then we'll pop it in the oven for I do a very quick, you don't need to have it in the oven very long. It just gives you a nice little firmer crust on the top of yours. So just a minute or two, kind of crisp it up because everything is already cooked on this one. Now, I know there's some people who love to add in like an egg yolk to their potato part to set it, but I like mine just on its own without the egg or any base into it because it sets firm enough for it and it's got that nice flavor texture to it. Beautiful. Okay, look, we've got it. We're going to add in our chunks of our meat right now. So this is our ground beef and our chunks. Make sure you get all of those juices in there as well. We're going to kind of coat this up in that lovely kind of gravy base. And again, we seasoned with rosemary and fresh thyme.
Yeah, question, are you making shepherd's pie for St. Patrick's Day?
Yes, it is a shepherd's pie for St. Patrick's Day and for Pie Day. It's kind of a 2-in-1 for it. So I always like to do leading up to it because there's so many favorite Irish dishes. So I'm making this, but on tomorrow, because our Tuesdays are typically busy and that's when St. Patrick's is. Tomorrow I'm doing my traditional corned beef dinner for St. Patrick's Day. That's what I always like to do. We kind of like to do a whole week of kind of Irish theme stuff. So my sister-in-law is actually from Ireland. And so we like to get really big in it for her. And on top of it, she was born on St. Patrick's Day. So I think that is the most Irish thing ever, to be born on St. Patrick's Day and be from Ireland. Here we go. We've got our base in here. Let's spoon in our mashed potatoes over the top. Let me just grab which one will be a good. We'll use my shovel. And now you can coat this up. If you want to do these in individuals, what you could do is put them in the little mini pie tins and then spoon it out and coat it up. We've got our mashed potatoes going right over the top here for this. Again, a nice, good, thick layer. So don't skimp out on your mashed potatoes because you have that gravy base underneath there, which is just going to be so delicious. Beautiful. And when you're scooping it on, try not to pull it up underneath so that you keep all that gravy base down below.
Do you add cheese to it?
I do not add cheese to my shepherd's pie. I always like it just the straight how it is, but you can definitely add it in if you want to. We prefer kind of just like the basic kind of the poor man's version of it. Beautiful. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go pop this in the oven real quick for about a minute or two. We'll take a quick peek on here. This is when I let you know that you pop it in here to give you this little crust on the top. So what I like to do is I put just about a spoonful of butter on top. And once that has melted over and kind of crisped up, then you know it is ready to go. And I'm going to grab my oven mitts. But the nice thing about this is it's pretty much all cooked up. You're just getting these things setting together for this. And we'll sneak a peek at our beautiful apple pie, which is just about done cooking here. We can give that a nice rotation as well. Beautiful. You can see the flaky layers on those, just perfect. I'm going to rotate it. And then while that is finishing up, I'm going to clear off and we're going to get ready to serve up here for this. Because it is time for pie day. Okay. Let's get these guys cleared out of the way. And that way, we do it and we'll cut our sourdough bread up here. And I don't know, let me wipe this down real quick for it. But we've got our nectarine pie, which tastes just like a peach pie. I always feel like people don't use nectarines a lot in cooking, but it really does the same thing as peaches, but you have less work, no fuzz. Okay, bring this guy over here. So here's our gorgeous nectarine pie. Again, 5 whole nectarines went into that guy. That's just how they shrink down. Okay, let's see. You know what? We're gonna do. Where is my? I was gonna say I was gonna use this one, but this one's not gonna allow me to cut down through the middle of it. Let's see if I have. No, here. Okay, let's get our sourdough cut. We've got our nice, beautiful crumb in there. How gorgeous is that? And now we can cut our slice to go on our tray.
Well, what size are the pie trays?
So these are, I think they're like 5 inches, maybe 6. I've never actually measured them. I've had these for, okay, these were actually gifted to me from my mom, which we actually had when I was in high school. So they're like 2+ decades old, but they're the deep dish pies from Williams and Sonoma. And so they are like perfect for that, for making deep dish pizzas or focaccias or whatnot. Let's go grab our apple pie out of the oven, and then we'll grab our other thing out of the oven because it should all be ready here. Beautiful. So we've got our apple pie. Gorgeous. Look at that nice, beautiful kind of golden crust on it. Beautiful. With that on there, and you can see the lattice on this is very, very thick and wonderful. And then we've got our shepherd's pie. And I said just until that butter is melted at the very end. It's perfect. Okay. Let's get ready to serve up on here. Okay, let me grab a nice scoop out on here. Okay. For dinner today, I'm going to grab, let me grab this because I know I'll try to grab that handle and it'll be so hot. We are going to have our shepherd's pie. So we're going to scoop down in here. Make sure you get a nice dollop of that butter. Grab your mashed potatoes up here on there. Beautiful. So we have our mashed potato base underneath. And then I'm going to grab another scoop of it. But look, under there we have our meat, our ground beef, and our beef chunks, mushrooms, carrots, mashed potatoes on the top. And then we made this lovely kind of gravy base using tomato paste, red wine, beef bouillon, and it's just full of flavors from rosemary and thyme, and just so delicious, kind of a nice Irish version of your shepherd's pie. And then we have our homemade sourdough on the side, which is our traditional loaf. And then for dessert, we have our two pies. We've got our nectarine pie, which we seasoned with brown sugar and cinnamon and with our butter crust, and you can see the gorgeous flaky layers. And then we have our apple pie, which again, we season with brown sugar, cinnamon, fresh lemon juice with our homemade pie crust on there. And it will go be delicious. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. We've got our shepherd's pie, our nectarine pie, and our apple pie, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Dutch ovens, knives, cutting boards, my oven mitts, everything I use in the kitchen for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.